Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Vault. Jersey Joe Archino back here. Clearly, the New York Giants have stolen the headlines as of right now in the current free agency period. And it's one of those things where the Giants had very identifiable problems from last season. There's one thing where you struggle and you can't really figure out what the main attribute to that struggle was. The Giants were a little bit different in that regard, where the clear issues that were persisting were linked to things, and they were easily identifiable. And I had the opportunity to cover the New York Giants last season for 104.5, the team, ESPN Radio Albany, so I was at every home game. I was in the locker room after every game, so I kind of saw it all play out, and after the season, I think we all kind of understood what the biggest problems facing this Giants team were, and many of them were on the defensive side of the football. And clearly, during the free agency period, they have done everything in their power to shore up those problems. The biggest one of all, of course, Olivier Vernon, really the guy you feel like, with the amount of money that they have invested in him, to be the cornerstone guy. And that's one thing certainly they lacked last season, is they lacked definable playmakers, a guy on the defensive side of the football where when you really needed a player, you really needed someone to take charge or to be the leader, there was nothing there. And I think clearly Vernon is a good player. The Giants feel they could make him a great player. And when you look at all the numbers, look, people are pointing to the sack numbers, but the sack numbers don't tell the whole story with Olivier Vernon. This is a guy who has consistent defensive pressure, and it's very difficult in the NFL to get that consistent defensive pressure, to understand, to read and react to the game. He constantly is putting up pressure, and certainly a lot of the things that the Giants lacked last season, he brings to the table. But you kind of look at the way things have gone with him, and he's certainly one of the cornerstones of the new people that they're bringing. But 5 years, $85.5 million, and he is now, as of yesterday, the highest paid defensive end in NFL history, which really says a lot. But, the Giants were in a position where they could spend a lot of money. This was certainly the type of player that they needed to bring in. And again, I think people who look at just the sack numbers don't really have the full story. This is a tremendous player who is, I would say, is good, very good, but the Giants feel like they could make him great and certainly are going to put him as one of the cornerstone pieces of this defense. And you just have to look at it in terms of this. Did they have a player like an Olivier Vernon last season? No, they did not. They did not get consistent pressure on the quarterback. This is a player that eases up everything, makes everyone else's job easier, and certainly is the right player for the right fit. And I think it was a move that makes a lot of conceivable sense for the Giants. It was a need, and when it's a need, it makes sense. And then we also look at Janoris Jenkins, who the Giants also got, a cornerback with great skills, great coverage skills, great athleticism. And last season, once again, we saw the Giants collectively as a defense were just not good last year. That's just the way it is. When it came to making plays, to coming away with chances that kept on falling in their hands, they were unable to come away with them. And I think certainly bringing a guy like this helps shore up the backfield. You have Olivier Vernon now, which certainly helps with the defensive pressure. So you're really starting to check the boxes off the list on the defensive side. And offensively, really not as worried about this Giants team. We saw yesterday, again, stealing the headlines. Victor Cruz agrees to restructure his deal. His base salary will be like $1.3 million next season. And then with incentives, I think the incentives are around $5.5 million. So he could make himself a whole lot more money just based on him playing. And really, we saw Victor Cruz go on social media and say, once a Giant, always a Giant. And it was one of those things where it was really stay with the Giants or go to another team and really maybe not get that good of a deal. I don't know if another team would have offered him the incentives that the Giants did, and certainly for him, he's now got put into a good situation where they need him. Really, they need Victor Cruz because the way they like to work offensively, really the focal point of that offense is based around the way Cruz and the way Odell Beckham Jr. play. I think the one thing the Giants still need is that big receiver. Now, I'm not talking about a big name. I'm talking about a big physical receiver who can just go up there and make plays and catch the football. Somebody to help kind of split the gap between Odell and between Victor Cruz, because the two of them are a little bit on the smaller side. They have great speed, they do everything well, but sometimes when you're sending them down the middle, I worry about them in terms of injury because of their smaller size, their smaller frame. So I think that's why you still need a big receiver who's physical and is going to be able to take those hits and sustain the hits, especially going up the middle. But as a whole, I think if you're a Giants fan, you couldn't be much happier, because the biggest things that you needed to do was fix the defense. And clearly another one, Jason Pierre-Paul returns on a 1-year, $10 million deal, and he's another guy where he's got circumstances, of course, coming off that injury. And was he great last season? No, of course not. I think it still was a tough adjustment period for him to learn how to play with his injury. But now we look at him, and he's kind of back. He's got his focus back. I think he feels wanted. He got that rough kind of coming back into the season after the contract holdout and the whole circumstances. Those are kind of all in the past now, and now we can just kind of look forward to next season. But clearly, when it comes to the pass rush for the Giants next season, it looks identifiably better already before we played a game. But the NFL is all about playing the games, and none of this means anything until we see it on the field. But I think when you look at it as a whole right now, the right moves were made. The defensive end was where the biggest priorities had to be, and that's not even taking into account that the Giants have a top 10 draft pick this season, and there's so many great defensive players in this draft. If they're able to get themselves a player like a Reggie Ragland potentially, they could fix that defense for the next 4, 5, 6 years conceivably. I mean, I really think they started to put the pieces together now, and then in the draft they can shore up the rest of things. But there's not as many skilled offensive players in this draft, and I don't think the Giants are in a position where they need to worry as much about the offensive side of the ball, because the offense largely played well last season. It was that defense that could never come away with any stops or always missed out on opportunities. And look, the Giants, you win as a team and you lose as a team. Sometimes certain phases of the game aren't suited to you, and certainly on the defensive side, the Giants were not best suited last season. But right now, they have fixed the identifiable problems temporarily, and they're going to have to continue to iron it out. But I think in the draft, like I said, if they're able to land themselves another cornerstone defensive player, if a Reggie Ragland falls to them, or another one of these, just the abundant number of talented defensive players we have, the Giants' defense could look night and day better than last season. And certainly Steve Spagnuolo is going to have a much easier time coaching up this team with the players and the playmakers that they have. But it starts with Olivier Vernon, because he is the man they have paid to be the cornerstone player of their defense, and I don't think that they will be disappointed by that move. But until next time, Jersey Joe Archino here with the Sports Vault. We'll be back next time.